The gods hurled everything they had at the giants, lightning, sea, and spear, and the giants would not die. The masters of creation could not win this war alone. Picture creatures with serpents for legs, tall as mountains, piling peak upon burning peak to climb into the sky and storm the home of the gods themselves. This was the Gigantomachy. And here is the secret the spectacle hides. The gods hurled everything they had, lightning, sea, and spear, and still the giants would not die. The masters of creation could not win this war alone. Remember how it ended. Zeus crowned king of the gods, the Titans chained forever in Tartarus, and deep in the green earth, one ancient power watching her children buried in the dark. That power was Gaia, the earth herself, grandmother of gods. She had counseled Zeus to victory, and now she could not forgive him for the chains he laid upon her sons. And so her grief became a weapon from her wrath, and from the old blood of Uranus still sleeping in her soil. Gaia raised a terrible new brood, the giants. These were no mere big men. They were earth-born monsters, mountain vast, with wild long hair, fierce faces, and great coiling serpents where their legs should be. They rose at Phlegra, the burning fields, where the ground itself smoked and split. In their hands they carried whole oak trees, set aflame, and peaks torn living from the earth. Gaia had made an army from the body of the world, and she pointed it at the sky. Her purpose was simple and total: pull down the new king and free the Titans from the pit. The Titans had warred from a distant mountain, far across the world. The giants would do something no enemy had ever dared. They marched straight at Olympus, at the very home of the gods. And the gods looked down from their bright halls to see the earth itself rising against them. A tide of serpent-legged monsters climbing toward heaven. The second great war had begun. The giants began to build. They tore mountains from their roots and piled them one upon another, peak on burning peak, raising a vast and broken stair to climb into the sky. And as they climbed, they threw. Flaming oaks and boulders the size of temples rained up at Olympus, smashing against its slopes, and the gods' own home shook beneath the assault. Two giants towered above the rest. Porphyrion, their king, vast and crowned and merciless, and Alcyoneus, the greatest of all, a giant who on his native soil simply could not die. The gods did not wait behind their walls. Zeus and his brothers, Athena in her bronze helm, the whole shining host of Olympus came down to meet the earth's army head-on. Zeus struck first, as he always had. The thunderbolt came down white and screaming, and a giant was thrown burning from the mountain stair to crash upon the ground far below. And then the horror. The giant who should have died simply rose again. Where he had fallen, the earth touched him and gave him back his life. The gods stared, uncomprehending. Athena drove her spear through another. Poseidon split the earth beneath a third. They fell and they stood back up. Every wound that should have been mortal closed like water over a stone. Down the whole burning line, the same horror spread. Strike them, scorch them, hurl them from the sky as you will, it did not matter. The giants would not stay dead. Why? Because of a secret written into the world before the war ever began, an oracle, an iron law of fate, that the gods now learned it in the worst way possible. No giant, the oracle said, could ever perish at the hand of a god. Not Zeus, not Athena, not all of Olympus together. Divine power alone could never kill a single one of them. Understand what that meant. The gods who had just conquered the Titans, the lords of all creation, could not win their own war. Their strength by itself was useless here. For the oracle held one mercy, and one only. A giant could die, but only if a god and a mortal struck it together. The lords of heaven needed a human, but where in all creation would they find one? But the gods were not the only ones who heard the prophecy. Deep in the earth, Gaia heard it too, and moved at once to slam shut even that single open door. Somewhere in the world grew a secret herb, a thing of such power it could make her giants invulnerable even to a mortal's hand. If Gaia found it first, the war was already lost. So she went searching through every shadowed valley and hidden grove, and Zeus, who missed nothing, saw what she was doing and did something only the king of the sky could do. He commanded the dawn not to rise. He forbade the moon and the sun to shine. And across the whole world, every light went out, and creation fell into total, starless dark. In that perfect darkness, Gaia could not find her herb, for nothing grows visible without the light. And through the black, by his own hand, Zeus went to the secret place first. He cut the herb of invulnerability himself, tore it whole from the earth, and took it out of the world forever. Gaia's last shield for her sons was gone before she could lift it. Then the king let the light return. Dawn rose, the sun climbed, the moon came back, and the one door the gods needed still stood open. Now they had only to find their mortal. And there was only one choice. The strongest mortal ever to walk the earth. A man born of Zeus and a mortal woman, half god, half human. His name was Heracles. So Athena, gray-eyed goddess of war, went down from Olympus into the world of men to fetch him, to call a single human up into the war of heaven itself. And he came, the lion's golden skin upon his shoulders, the great bow in his fist. A mortal stood unafraid among the deathless gods, ready to fight a war that was never meant to be his. Think on what that meant. At the very summit of their power, the gods of Olympus had been forced to reach down to the world of mortals and ask a man for help. The Titanomachy had taught Zeus to share his power with the monsters he freed. The Gigantomachy would teach the gods to share it with humankind. Heaven at last had bound itself to earth. And now the war could truly begin. God and mortal, side by side, turned together to face the earth's towering children. The thing the oracle demanded was finally in place. They went first for Alcyoneus, the greatest giant, the one no blow could kill. Heracles drew the great bow, loosed, and the arrow took the giant clean through. Alcyoneus fell like a toppled mountain. And then, before their eyes, he rose. The moment his body touched his native ground, the earth poured strength back into him, and the deathless giant stood whole again, unhurt and laughing. But Athena had seen the trick of it. She came to Heracles' side and spoke the answer low and fast. He lives only on the land that bore him. Drag him off it, then he dies. So Heracles seized the colossus in his mortal arms and hauled across the border of his homeland onto foreign soil. And there, cut off from the earth that fed him, Alcyoneus died at last. The greatest giant of all, undone not by raw power but by a mortal's strength and a goddess's cunning, working as one. The oracle had spoken true. This was how the war would be won. Then Porphyrion, the giant king, turned his fury on Heracles and on Hera, the queen of heaven herself, reaching for her with murder in his hands. But Zeus saw the opening and made a trap from it. He filled the giant king with a sudden blinding lust for Hera, and Porphyrion forgot the battle and lunged to seize the queen. As the giant tore at Hera's robe, the thunderbolt came down and struck him senseless, and in that frozen instant, Heracles' arrow flew and ended the king of the giants forever. And there was the pattern, made law, the gods' blow to break them, the mortal's arrow to finish them. Across the whole battlefront, that deadly partnership began to repeat. Apollo, god of the bow, shot the giant Ephialtes through the left eye, and Heracles' arrow took the right. 2 archers, one divine and one mortal, and the giant fell between them. Dionysus came laughing with his ivy-wreathed staff and burned the giant Eurytus down. Dark Hecate swept in with twin torches and set the giant Clitius ablaze in the smoke. Hephaestus, the smith god, poured a flood of molten, red-hot metal over the giant Mimas, drowning him in the fire of his own forge. The whole pantheon had gone to war. Hermes put on the helm of Hades, the cap of pure darkness that hides its wearer from all eyes, and walking unseen through the chaos, cut down the giant Hippolytus. Artemis loosed a silver arrow and dropped the giant Gratian, and the three grim fates themselves waded in with clubs of bronze and beat the giants Agrius and Thoas into the dust. Every god in heaven was striking now, and beside each one the same mortal hand. Heracles moved through the whole burning field, his arrow the final word on every giant that fell. One giant, Enceladus, saw the slaughter and broke. He turned from the battle and ran, a mountain in flight, fleeing across the world with the war goddess close behind. And Athena did not chase him with a spear. She reached down, tore the whole island of Sicily loose from the sea, lifted it high and slammed it down on top of him. Enceladus was not killed. He was buried, pinned forever beneath the island, under a great mountain we still know today. That mountain is Etna. And when Etna roars and pours its fire down the mountainside, the old story says it is the giant beneath it, Enceladus, still breathing flame, still struggling under the weight of the world. Poseidon hunted his giant across the open sea. He ran polyboats down, broke a great piece off a distant island with his trident, and hurled it to crush the giant beneath the stone. That broken fragment became the island of Nisros, another giant sealed under the earth, another piece of the real Mediterranean made from the bones of this war. Athena took one more. She slew the giant Pallas, flayed the hide from his body, and wore it ever after as her armor, the war goddess clad in the skin of a giant. Now the end came fast. Zeus stood in the burning sky and rained the full thunderbolt down, blasting the last giants from their broken mountain stair as Heracles shot each one falling. The stair of piled peaks collapsed. The tide of monsters broke and fell back into the earth that had made them. The assault on heaven was thrown down, and the sky belonged to the gods again. But the gods would never forget how it had truly ended, not by the lightning, not by all the might of Olympus alone, but by a god and a mortal striking as one. And mark this well, for the stories forever confuse it. This was not the Titanomachy. The giants were not the Titans. A different enemy, a different war, and one a different way entirely. The Titans were elder gods chained in the pit. The giants were Gaia's earthborn monsters buried under her own mountains. 2 wars, 2 enemies, and the second taught the harder lesson. For when it was over, one figure stood among the gods who did not belong there, a mortal man. Heracles, the human being without whom heaven itself would have fallen. The Titanomachy had taught Zeus to share power with the monsters beneath the world. The Gigantomachy taught the gods to share it downward with mortals, with humankind, with us. And in that, a new age was born, the age of heroes, when gods and mortals would stand side by side. A man like Heracles could one day climb so high that he became a god himself. Here is the law the whole story keeps teaching. One turn deeper. A throne is never held alone, not by hoarding power, not even by divine power. Only by the alliances a king is wise enough to make. Zeus had learned it twice now. He freed the monsters his father feared, and they won him the Titans. He trusted a mortal, and that mortal won him the giants. And yet the wheel of the heavens does not stop turning. Twice now, Gaia had struck at the new king, and twice she had been beaten, the Titans chained, the giants buried in her own flesh. But the earth was not finished. In her grief and her fury, she had one child left to bear. Not a Titan, not a giant, but the most monstrous thing the cosmos would ever see. a creature with 100 serpent heads and fire for eyes tall enough to scrape the stars. Typhon was coming, and against that horror no mortal could help. Zeus would face it alone. Thank you for watching. If this tale stayed with you, subscribe. A new myth arrives every week, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Until then, may the old stories keep their hold on you.